Welcome everybody, my name is Katie St. Peter. I'm the Senior Manager of Digital Demand Growth at Cyber6Skill. Today I'm joined by Brad Liggett, who's the Global Director of Threat Analyst, as well as Delilah Schwartz, who's our Product Marketing and Security Strategist, and finally, Chris Strand, who's our Chief Risk and Compliance Officer. Welcome to our panel series where we're going to be diving into different industry trends, as well as some exciting news we just released here at RSA today. And also diving deep into our State of the Underground report, which was released 2 weeks ago. So Brad, what is actually happening in the market right now?
Well, there's a lot going on in the market right now. I think the focus that we're bringing in this week is, if you refer back to Gartner has released some reports here recently about external attack surface management. We think this is at the core of what teams should be focusing on. It's no longer a nice to have, it's truly becoming a need to have. A lot of people will always say you can't defend what you don't know. But again, you know, the just digital transformation that continues to happen, the explosion of assets that are being spun up, and not only that, but even, you know, the various attributes of those assets, whether it's bringing in different code libraries for user experience, all of these things just inflate the software bill of materials, which then you have to understand if you want to have a program around threat-informed defense that brings in, you know, all of these various assets and then correlating them back to, you know, are there known vulnerabilities, what are the exploits that are being talked about in the underground, all of those various things. You know, what we've seen over the past couple of years in the underground certainly comes back to this whole, there's a lower barrier of entry for threat actors or new criminal organizations, new exploits being found. People are selling not only the services around them, but even the know-how and the knowledge. And you see threat actors that are posting, you know, almost like consulting services in these underground markets to help people get in for this type of activity.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting take. I know in our recent report, State of the Underground, we talked a lot about the lowering the barriers to entry. What do you quite mean by that, Delilah? I know that you were a big, you know, piece of writing that report for us and gave a lot of knowledge and insight into that. Can you touch on that a little bit more?
Absolutely. So to take it back to a little bit of what Brad said, the rapid race towards digitization has inflated the attack surface for organizations, and it presents cybercriminals with an abundance of opportunities for attacks. So more opportunity also is one contributor. In addition to that, as Brad said, we've got the proliferation of tools, processes, and know-how, and the commoditization of cybercriminal expertise. So you don't have to know everything anymore, you don't have to be an expert in certain components of the attack chain. You can actually outsource that expertise and that knowledge by other cybercriminals and then tie it all together to be part of this larger attack chain. So in recent years we've seen the massive rise in initial access broker markets, which is literally outsourced access, providing cybercriminals with their first foothold into their target's infrastructure, which makes the facilitation of an attack so much easier. And of course, in just the past few months, we've seen a massive public discourse around AI generative tools like ChatGPT, and while it's not going to replace humans as part of the attack process, it definitely is a force multiplier for cybercrime, allowing cybercriminals to optimize and accelerate their activities with the help of these new tools and processes, in addition to these as-a-service offerings and the new types of cybercrime that are emerging. So all this together has contributed to this just decline, this erosion of barriers to entry, allowing cybercriminals to sort of dip their toes into cybercrime, like the novice, new kids on the block, to sort of accelerate their learning curve, and also to engage in cybercrime that was typically only accessible to those with high levels of expertise. So it's democratizing cybercrime across various levels of cybercriminal and threat actor expertise. So it's been a very interesting thing to be observing over the past several years, and we don't expect that trend to be slowing down anytime soon either.
Yeah. No, I know that, we touched on that a lot in the report, and with us being at RSA this week, we just released our attack surface management module, so that can kind of help combat those challenges that we're seeing. What are the challenges of a growing attack surface, Brad? As you're speaking to clients and people in the industry, what are some of those challenges that they're seeing?
Sure, I mean, I touched on a few of the things prior, right? But, when it comes to understanding what it is that you have in your environment, what we've seen over the years, what I've personally observed over the years is sometimes it's just as simple as a spreadsheet. Here's my list of domains, or here's my list of IP ranges. But, what are they getting from cloud providers? What are they getting from other service providers? What are the connections into third parties, and all of those various assets coming back together?
Whatever it is, the
Instead of being
naysayers.
the Department of No,
Exactly.
they can know and they can trust that they have a system that is constantly looking for all of the new assets that pop up, all of the new environments that are there. And external attack surface management from the outside looking in absolutely gives them
Confidence.
that ability and that confidence.
Peace of mind too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you went into deeper dive into attack surface management, not only from GRC perspective, but also for security professionals and CISOs. I guess wrapping this whole conversation up is how can organizations really tackle this challenge and take it on full steam ahead?
I think the key component of this is to make sure that you don't have blind spots into your organizational environment. To really make sure that you have full visibility into your connected assets and the potential exposures to attack. It's like, I like to make to use the metaphor of a house. If there's a burglar that wants to break into a house, they need to go all around the house. They might find an unlocked door, or a window that's unlatched, or a doggy door that they can sneak through. And all the various connected assets present that potential opportunity for the cyber break-in, for the intrusion. So you want to make sure that you know where your perimeter is, so that you can make sure that there's no little holes in the wall or an unlatched doggy door, to make sure that you're able to actually get a handle on your entire environment, effectively protect it, and be monitoring it so you're not constantly reacting to the incident after it's already happened, but actually to proactively be and preemptively protecting against potential exposures before they can actually materialize. And that requires a combination of both the knowledge, the visibility into your attack surface, inventory, as Brad mentioned, of all of the connected assets, and also some understanding of the actual threats and what cyber criminals are actually intending to do. And that's, more where Brad's sort of specialty comes in, the insight into the mind of the threat actor.
Yeah, I think another thing that's really important is this whole concept of being secure by design, right? From the very outset, as you're developing a new application or developing some kind of new UI or user experience for your clients, making sure that those development teams understand that the code repositories that may be brought in from various open source libraries or some other areas, those are reviewed before they're even put in and kind of wired into that application, because that extends, that's that nth degree of exposure that brings you in. What are they doing to ensure that their coding is not introducing more vulnerabilities, more exploit pathways into the environment. And I think that's something we'll see a lot more of. There's been a lot of talk in the industry, especially around the new cybersecurity initiative that the White House in the United States brought up earlier in the year, is that secure by design concept.
And if we take it down, we distill it according to the way that we've designed our new attack surface management module, it's like a cyclical process that's continuous. It's the discovery of the connected assets, external and internal, to provide that internal organizational context of what's happening internally inside the business, the scoping of the attack surface, of your unique attack surface, and then also tying in the continuous monitoring of those assets to monitor for exposures, and that a critical ingredient in that is threat intelligence and contextual, context-rich threat intelligence to really make sure that at the first potential detection of a risk or exposure or an intention of a cybercriminal threat actor to attack one of your assets, that you're able to continuously monitor and flag that so that you can actually take the steps to mitigate or to prevent that potential attack before it happens. And then of course to prioritize your risks based not only on the intention of the threat actor, of the possibility of risk, but also on the business criticality of that asset. So tying in all those different components so that you can actually focus your efforts and your resources where they actually matter most, so that you're not missing out on the most important threats or focusing your efforts on the threats that don't actually matter. Because, you know, Lord knows that cybersecurity professionals are under a lot of pressure and have so much work that they need to do. You need to be effectively prioritizing your focus.
Yeah, that's a great point. And my next, thought as you all were talking was, how does ASM really enhance and, prioritize that vulnerability? Chris, I know that you, from a GRC perspective, but as a whole, how can, ASM enhance and enrich the vulnerability prioritization?
And that's one of the key components to meet this challenge. So both Brad and Delilah are touching on points around continuous monitoring and understanding what the processors are doing at a different level. One of the things that has become almost, and in fact in some cases has become mandatory, is the ability to continuously understand what risk your enterprise is under. And so from a risk manager perspective or from a GRC perspective, these are security folks who not only need to make some sense of all this, but they need to be able to continuously understand where the highest priorities are from a security perspective. And that boils down to vulnerability prioritization. And as I was touching on, vulnerability prioritization in certain mandates has become necessary. It's become, again, it's not a nice to have, it's a need to have. You have no choice but to be able to understand where your gaps are, but then you need to be able to prioritize those gaps, and then you need to prove it. And that third step is the piece that is missing from the equation in some senses, because maybe the wrong mix of technology or just the solutions aren't in place. But just like anything else, your solution to a problem is only as good as the data that you put into it. And the value of that data will dictate whether you're able to stand up with integrity and prove without a shadow of a doubt that that your results are enforceable. And this is a piece that really comes home to GRC managers, because you have to basically sign your name on that report that says that this organization is this level of risk, and that you've prioritized and understood where all the gaps are, and then that you can prove it. So you really need a context-enriched solution that can provide you all of the information that Brad and Delilah are touching on, as well as the data behind the scenes to prove that your findings are exactly what they should be. And you need to do this continuously. So it's a tall order, but really from a GRC perspective, it's not something that we can just ignore any longer. We have to be able to prioritize and prove that prioritization.
I think that element of communicability, or ability to communicate with other stakeholders, is such an important component for GRC, and also in general for cybersecurity practitioners, especially for CISOs, that they need to be communicating the justification behind their decisions to executives, to the board, to investors, to other stakeholders that are interested in this. So the ability to provide that coherent, understandable explanation of why I responded the way that I did, why I prioritized the risks that I did, why I acted in the way that I did, what was the information that guided this decision, and that threat-informed or risk-informed decision-making process in a way that's not just limited to that cyber speak that's only understood by certain individuals that work in the cybersecurity industry, because cybersecurity is now understood, finally, we can thank God for that, thank whoever, that finally everybody understands that cybersecurity is critical. It's a critical component of any business to be making sure that their cybersecurity is up to par. And not everybody has that vernacular, the cyber vernacular, so to be able to have that easily communicable justification is so critical for so many different stakeholders, and especially for GRC, but also elsewhere.
Yeah, you know, when it comes to prioritization too, you know, you can't patch everything. And to Chris's point, you need that justification of, you know, why you went down this road for remediation and maybe not this road. And again, having a system that allows you to understand the prioritization. What I mean by prioritization is, you know, there's dozens of CVEs that are reported every single day. And so how do you then understand not only what is in your environment with, like, for example, attack surface management and some other vulnerability and remediation tools, but how do you prioritize what's most important? And so understanding, yes, something has been released, something is out there, you do have it in your environment, but you also have this long list from weeks or maybe months or even the year before. You know, understanding, hey, are there active exploits that are being talked about? Is there exploit code that is being shared in the community? These are ways that you can then say, okay, I know that this particular one is being exploited, and, you know, using threat profiling like some mature organizations are doing, they see that, okay, well, this particular group or criminal organizations, they're talking about it, they're raising the profile of it. I know that they're attacking my industry or, you know, targeting my industry. Let's go ahead and move these up. Let's get these done. Let's get these through change management. Let's get everything tested. Because, you know, also when it comes to vulnerability remediation, sometimes the patches will break business processes. And you need to make sure that they're thoroughly tested before you roll them out into production.
Yeah, as we said, almost 200,000 vulnerabilities right now are on the CVE list. According to Gartner, only around 6% of them are actually going to be exploited. And if we whittle that number down even more, understanding, as Brad said, you can't patch everything because it harms business processes and no one has the time. It's just too much effort, too much to do. But there's vulnerabilities that affect products, but there are multiple product versions. So you might have a certain product installed, but the vulnerability may be in a product version that is no longer on your computer. So how do you then narrow your focus even more? And beyond that, as we said, it's not always the headline grabbing vulnerabilities that are those that are actually being the focus or targeted by cyber criminals. Sometimes it's vulnerabilities from the early 2000s that organizations still haven't gotten around to patching or didn't think they needed to, and they're the ones that are actually actively targeted. So it's not just about, we've got the CVSS score, which is a measure of severity, and in the directory, in the instruction manual, makes it very clear that it's a measure of severity and not risk. But you need to refine your focus, not only for the 6% of vulnerabilities that might be exploited, but the actual CPEs, the product versions that you've got installed, and then which ones are also being discussed by cyber criminals, which one have exploit kits, as Brad said, which ones are actually being actively targeted. And that allows you to sort of remove the false positives and the false negatives as well, which is also a massive problem, to really make sure that the vulnerabilities that you're prioritizing the remediation or mitigation processes for are actually the ones that matter to your business. Because while Log4j affected businesses worldwide, if you're busy remediating or looking to remediate or mitigate Log4j, it's not even present on your computer, on your systems. You've just wasted time on a vulnerability that doesn't actually matter to your business at all.
Yeah.
You may be missing out another one that does, you know?
Absolutely. There's two important points from a risk management perspective that I want to overemphasize, and that's, you know, the ability, Brad's talking about having a baseline of data. So for risk managers, this is again, this is another critical component in trying to solve the vulnerability prioritization formula, which is now mandatory in many different regulations and compliance guidelines. You know, along the lines of being able to prove your formula and say that unequivocally that this is 100% ironclad and it's enforceable, you need a decent baseline of data to understand how different vulnerabilities are posing risk to your organization. Delilah is mentioning a point around one of my nemesis areas, and that is negative zero-day vulnerabilities. So talking about vulnerability, there's so many, and there's ones that are reused from 10, 15 years ago that suddenly pop up on the scene because some operating system or application has gone end of life, is not used anymore, and the exploit community or nefarious actors will see that, hey, this is something I could prey upon. And I know and guarantee, as you look and you trace through the deep and dark web and you see forums discussing how easy this is to execute on this old operating system that no one even realizes anymore. But this is from 5, 6, 10 years ago and goes unnoticed, slides right through the cracks, and then it causes you know, a great deal of stress for at every level of the organization. But in trying to basically solve that vulnerability prioritization formula, you have to have these two into account, and that baseline of data is a huge help to understand, you know, that preemptive analysis of what might be happening to this organization. And this is from a risk perspective. That understanding and that level of data is critical and paramount to be able to stand behind your prioritization and your risk management.
Yeah, and so many of the other our competitors in the market, they're only conducting their risk analysis for vulnerabilities that have been released over the past 12 months.
Right.
For me, that's almost laughable because, as you mentioned, there are multiple vulnerabilities that are being discussed actively on the underground today that are actually vulnerabilities that are far before 12 months ago, 5, 10, sometimes more. And to bring it back to the Gardner report that we mentioned earlier that was released last week discussing ASM, 2 of the main components that Gardner's identified that are critical for the evolution of attack surface management solutions is A, the integration of threat intelligence, contextual threat intelligence, and also with vulnerability assessment and vulnerability prioritization. And that together sort of forms this basis for the continuous threat exposure management program, which is the forward-facing proactive approach to cybersecurity, which we say the industry is working towards, those mature organizations that recognize that you need to be forward-facing. You can't be continuously playing cyber whack-a-mole, responding to incidents as they pop up. You need to be proactively looking for the areas that you could be exposed in so that you can preempt them before they actually attack you and leave damage in its wake. We all know what happens when organizations suffer a massive cyber incident. The best way to defend against it is to be proactive, and that can only happen with context-rich threat intelligence and the continuous threat exposure management program that Gardner's been discussing for quite some time.
Yeah, and that, you know, is our theme this whole week at RSA is CTI and ASM better together. So, you know, we've touched on all the challenges in the industry, so we're going to take it to our next video and talk a little bit deeper into attack surface management. But thank you guys for touching on all of the industry challenges and where the market stands today.
So great.
Thank you.
Lots of thanks.